So, since it's difficult to kind of get everyone together at the same time, I just wanted to kind of do a courtesy and go over APA paper 2. So, if you decide to do APA paper 1, then you can just go to where it says APA resources. You could go towards the bottom where it says APA paper 2, and then you'll see the directions for that. What I'm going to go over is the alternative paper, and that's just because more people are wanting to do this one, a case study analysis of a serial killer, versus doing the traditional APA paper 2. But I will go over that a little bit. I've already gone over that, but I just wanted to highlight this. And honestly, I wish when I was learning APA that I had an instructor or professor that kind of guided me and showed me. But unfortunately, I had to learn APA on my own. So, all right. So what you're seeing right here is this is under the APA alternative paper to, to do the serial killer. So if you look, I have, I'm going to be reading off of this as well and going through the APA paper. So this is already under your under that serial killer module, and this is just the direction. So if you see that big arrow, you know you're looking at the right one. So this is the alternative paper. And then it gives the directions, kind of tells you this is the MO of a serial killer, kind of what their pattern and profile is. So if you are to go to the second page and flip it over, you're going to see the directions up here. So the directions are you're going to write a paper about a specific serial killer using Erik Erikson's developmental stages. This case study analysis will apply the theoretical framework to a real-life serial killer. The paper must detail how failures to resolve the core crises in each stage of psychosocial development may have contributed to the individual criminal's behavior. So, if you go on the files tab, you're going to see an Erik Erikson folder, and that's going to have 3 different styles that I have typed up, that information that I've received, and just 3 different ways. They all have his 8 stages of psychosocial development, but you're going to see a lot of depth in one that you might not see in the other. So it just gives you an idea of his stages that you've already learned about. So what you're doing, whether you do the traditional APA paper or you do the serial killer, you're applying Erikson's psychosocial stages of development. Now, what we're focusing on with the serial killer is we're focusing on the crisis. So, for example, in Erikson's first stage, it's trust versus mistrust, right? So we're focusing on the mistrust because what we're looking at is, all right, what was the pattern, what was the developmental upbringing of this child that kind of grew up into be this person. So when you're researching their childhood, you're researching what their parents were like, what it was like when they were a child going to school, high school, all of the things that made up this person. And so you're investigating. So when you're doing a case study analysis, you're just investigating what this person kind of went through or how they grew up to apply these concepts of Erikson's psychosocial stages. So let me just toss out something very, like, not vague, but just kind of like to snapshot something. So a baby, they're born. The first stage in Erikson's theory is trust versus mistrust. And so what's happening in that, in that stage is that the infant is learning to trust the world around them, right? So in order to develop trust, that means their caregiver loves them and takes care of them. When they cry, they're picked up, right? When they're hungry, they get fed. They're not left to their own devices, right? To just constantly cry or be unhappy. So when a child does not get that nurturance, already they learn mistrust in the world. That, even though they're that small, they may not remember it like, oh, I was a baby, I cried, my parent didn't pick me up. No. But what happens is then it moves into the next stage, right? So then you have stage 2 and stage 3. And if you're not getting those needs met in earlier, at the foundation, chances are they're not getting met in the next stage or the next stage. So what you're focusing on is, where did things kind of go wrong to where they learn to not trust in the world. Now, there are, outliers. There are situations where the serial killer, right, was just born that way, right? They could have had a good childhood. Most of them don't, but they could have, and there was something not connected there. Those neurotransmitters, those neural pathways, something was just not right. So that would be an exception to the norm. That's rarely the issue. So you're going to focus on one where you're going to be able to get information and apply that to Erikson stages. Now, you'll notice in the example that I'm going to go over that I go through all 8 stages. Now, that does not mean you have to go through all 8 stages, nor would you, because that serial killer could have gotten caught in their late 20s, right? Or early 30s or whatever. So you're going to apply it based on that stage. I hope that's making sense. And again, if you need any specific things answered or you have questions, you can always reach out to me and I will go over them. All right, so I am looking at the directions right now, and then I'm going to apply it to this, paper. All right, so let's just start off by looking at the paper. Whether you do the serial killer or the traditional paper, note that it needs to be set up just like this. So what I would do is I would just download this, and then, like I've showed you before, download the document, open it up, and then change it to what your title will be. Change it, obviously, to your name. I use Jane Hopper from Stranger Things, right? Keep this the same, keep this the same. And, what I notice in papers, and we want to start to master that because we've done APA paper number 1 already, which was an intro paper about yourself. Now, when we're getting into paper 2, this is research. So always have the page number just like this. So if you use my template here, then you can just use this. You don't have to change anything. This is always bold. What I've noticed with students is either they will not put a title or they will put a title and it's not bold. And then when we get to page 2, the title's missing. So make sure that your title is on the title page and then page 2, not page 3, page 4, page 5. And how you do that is you separate the pages. So when I made the document, I did it in a way that it wouldn't go to every single page. So again, I already set it up for you. So you will title it, it'll be in bold. You'll notice there is an extra spacing here, so a double space. That's the only time you're going to have that in APA. After that, everything must be double spaced all the way through. And I find that in student papers where there's extra spacing, single spacing, just make sure it needs to follow this format. All right, so your name is going to go here. This is already done for you. It's Department of Psychology, Eastern Florida State College, and this is done for you. PSY 2012, General Psychology. You're not going to write General Psychology 1, or it's going to be just like this. And then it's always going to be your instructor or professor's professional name. So if they have a doctorate, it's going to be just like this, doctor, and then whoever it is. If they don't, and let's say I had a master's degree, then it's just going to be Robin Z. Miller. It's not going to be Professor Robin Z. Miller. It's just going to be my name. And then this is where I'm seeing people making mistakes, even though I discussed this already. It's always the due date. It's not when you turn it in. It's not my rule. It's an APA rule. So make sure whatever the due date is, that is what it is. And it's going to be spelled out. Some students have been doing numbers. Some students have been putting it backwards. It's November, spell it out, 2-3, comma. Remember, we're not, remove the RD or TH if it puts it there. It's just numbers. And that's what it looks like. So you've got your title page. Perfect. Then we get to page 2. So this is where, you see this. It's not going to look like this. I did this as an example for you. So now we're going to go back and look at the directions, and it will make sense here. All right. So if we look at the directions, okay, now where did I put that? Okay. Oh, so in here, this is just telling you like stage 1, all the stages, right? And then you get to the actual what to include. So on page, where am I at? On page 2, you get to the middle, and I think I changed it. I definitely think I changed it. When we get to this, you're going to title it again. You're not going to write introduction under that. We don't include that actual title in it. You're just going to start with the introduction after your title. So when you look at title page, it says follow the APA 7th edition student paper format, which includes the paper's title, your name, department, everything I just went over. Remember, and I put that in all caps, the date is the due date, not the date you turned it in or the date you wrote it. APA follows the guidelines of the due date. All right, so now introduction. All right, so you start with a hook, and everything, the directions are there. Begin with a sentence that introduces the psychological puzzle of serial killers and their developmental background. Again, general. We're not talking about your serial killer. We're just talking about in general. So you notice I just whipped something up. So I just wrote, the data on serial killers show that most of these individuals grew up in some form of abusive home. Now, I got that from this resource. I am not doing word for word what they said. That's where we paraphrase. So you take the information of where you find it, put it into your own words. So if you were to look up this article, you would see how I took that and I put it in my own words. So it said something about serial killers and how, many of them grow up in these types of homes. All I did is reworded it so that I'm not plagiarizing. That's what it is when you do research. A good kind of rule of thumb is you don't put 3 or more words string together from that document. Put it in your own words. Where it's different, I believe, with MLA to APA is that you're not quoting. Please remember, sometimes I see students, they quote everything. We don't quote, we cite. You only, in APA, the only time you quote is when you're actually using quotation, like you're quoting someone's, like, wherever you go, there you are. Like, who said that? That you quote that. According to blah, blah. That's when you would quote. But when we are using information that we got from somewhere, we cite. Very important in APA. You want to cite when it's not your original idea or when it's not common knowledge. So if you were to say, the sky is blue, you don't have to cite that because that's common knowledge that the sky is blue. But when I say the data on serial killers show that most of these individuals grew up in some form of abusive home, well, how do I know that? I had to have gotten that somewhere. So Google Scholar is your friend. I would use Google Scholar, especially now when you're beginning APA. The reason is you go on there, and when you get to Google Scholar in the search bar, you would just type, what is the data on serial killers? Find one you like that's within 5 years of publication. Remember, it has to be within 5 years. We're not looking in the 2000s and the early. We're looking at 2020 and above. Okay, so 5 years and more. Now, you're going to look at, you can have information from the 80s, 70s, and you can use that and cite that. But when you're writing a paper, the majority of your references have to be current. You can use dated, but if your instructor or professor says, okay, you have to have this many references, make sure that those references are current, and anything outside of that that's older is extra. So hope that makes sense. All right, so and you'll notice that it's et al. Because it's more than two authors. If it's one author, it's just like this. Where did I cite Yang? That's somewhere. Okay, right here. This was just one author. When you cite two or more, it's et al. If you cite two, then it's like this. Okay, so you notice how I cited it. It's always in parentheses. It's et al, period, comma, the year, and then parenthesis. The period always goes outside of the parenthesis, not in it. It doesn't go here because some professors will dock you for that. That's happened to me years ago. So make sure the period goes after. Now, the reason this is underlined is because I'm just giving you directions. Normally, take this out. If you're going to use this as a template, take this out. You're not underlining this. So what I said is further, now this is where I'm giving you direction. Further, this is where you will provide a little more detail about the background of a serial killer. Again, you're providing background. That's in your directions. So it says background, begin with a sentence that introduces the psychological puzzle of serial killers and their developmental background. Cite your information. So I did that. And then you're going to go on just a little further about serial killers. So you find your own information in and put that in there. If you are using another source, another reference, cite that if you're no longer using this. If you're continuing with this reference, then you could just cite at the end when you're done using it. Just remember, you don't just cite once. Look at the rules on citing. All right. And then I said, then you will briefly discuss Erikson's theory, example below, which is this sentence. Then you will introduce the serial killer you will analyze, ending with your thesis statement. So you'll notice when you look at the directions, it says, okay, hook, do the sentence, bring them in. Background, introduce Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, which emphasizes the social and cultural factors that shape personality through the lifespan. Make sure to cite your information appropriately. You will explain that a failure to successfully navigate the central conflicts of each stage can lead to unhealthy personality according to the research you found. This is just giving you direction. So when you look up Erikson's psychosocial stages of development, you will find information that he wrote in 1959. Now, we're not using that. So again, go on Google Scholar, type in Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development. Then you notice how I did that, and I put very briefly, Erik Erikson developed an 8-stage theory of psychosocial development from birth into late adulthood. Boom. This is where I found it. I cited it. Okay. Then I said continue with some more brief facts regarding the background of Erikson's theory in crisis. You're not going to say stage 1 was this, stage 2 was that. You don't want to, it's just a nice, decent paragraph as your intro. I don't need to know all of Erikson's 8 stages. I already know that. What you're doing is you're just painting a picture of what his theory is and then how you're going to tie that in. And then finally it says this case study focuses on, and then I put use present tense because in APA you are writing the paper. So we're using present tense. It's not focused on because you're writing it, right? When you get down the road to like a dissertation, you would do a whole dissertation in present tense, and then your chair would have you then take everything once they approve everything, then you would go back and change it to past tense. You're not for this paper, but I'm just If you decide to get a master's or doctorate, that's what would happen. All right, so again, this case study focuses on, and then I just put the serial killer Richard Ramirez. So whoever yours is, that's what you would put. And then the purpose of this case study is to, and then boom, that's your thesis statement. And that is the introduction. So that's where I wanted to guide you through, hey, here's paragraph 1. Now we get to the literature review. Now, if you look at on your paper where it says literature review, this will be centered and bolded. So you see, I did that for you. And now you see psychological factors, childhood influences, existing research. I just set it up for you. Do you have to use these? No, you don't. These are your level 1 headings. So what your on the side here, we're just kind of doing a basic paper. You don't have to have an abstract or any of that. I'm introducing you to APA research. As you move forward with other instructors, they may have you do abstracts. They may have you do level 1, level 2, level 3 headings. I'm getting you into just getting your feet wet with this. So you'll notice when you look at the directions, it says, include a section here to discuss existing research on, and then look at the bullets, the psychological factors influencing serial killers. So note, see how I put very short psychological factors. You're going to come up with your own short title. If you want to leave that there, you can, because it says psychological factors influencing serial killers. When you have level 1, 2 headings, they're short. They're 2 to 3 words of the main thing you're going to get across. So in this paragraph, we're going to be talking about psychological factors that affect serial killer behavior. When we get to this, or when you get to this, you're going to discuss childhood influences. So if you notice in the directions, it says bullet 1, psychological factors influencing serial killers. Second bullet, the role of childhood trauma, neglect, and abuse in the formation of psychopathic personalities. Notice how I just put childhood influences. If you want to change it and make it a different little, subtitle, go right ahead. And then you get to existing research. So notice that direction there under literature review, existing research that specifically applies developmental theories like Erikson's to understand criminal behavior. That's where you're going to talk about existing research related to that topic. And tie Erikson in. Again, these are going to be paragraphs. So this is not the depth. Our depth is when we get to the analysis, the actual serial killer. All right, so now we have methodology. What I wanted to show you is I really wanted it to look like this because I've had instructors either dock me off a couple points or say, hey, change this. This is called orphaned. So in APA, you'll notice it says methodology, and now okay, it goes here. They will teach you, you'll learn in APA, never to have a title orphaned. So if that means that once, and obviously it won't be in this case, but let's just say you ever have this situation. Yes, they want 1-inch margins all the way around. The exception to that is if there's an orphaned title, then that's what they call it. So what you would do is you would just space down once so that this would go to this page. That's the only time you're going to have extra spacing. That's not going to be 1 inch down at the bottom. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so now when we get to methodology, this is where you will explain the case study approach per the directions that I have for you. And remember to cite all your information. So methodology up here, again, it's going to be centered. Explain that you will be using a case study approach, analyzing secondary biographical information from books, articles, and reputable sources to construct a narrative of the killer's life. Now, are you typing that? No. You're going to come up with your own thing to say. So you're going to say, I am using a case study approach to analyze my serial killer, right? And then you can say a case study is when, Okay, so for example, a case study is when you are studying one person in depth or a unit, like a family. Now, would you have to cite that? Yes. Why? Because that's not common knowledge. You had to find that somewhere. That's when Google Scholar is your friend. You type in scholarly, because you want it to be scholarly. It's not like you're not using just the internet. You're not just using some article from some psych, whatever. You're saying, okay, like what is a case study? Or you can cite the dictionary. You can do that. But when you do say, I will be using a case study approach, you don't have to cite that. Next sentence, a case study is. Now, once you're saying what something is, that's not your original idea. Cite where you got that from. If you don't, it's plagiarized. So just remember, citing is very important in APA. All right, now we get on to the good part, the analysis. Now, this is a lot easier than it seems, okay? I know it seems like daunting at first. And the same will apply if you're doing the traditional APA paper. Just, all right, so analysis. This will be centered and bolded as well. So Erikson stages and the serial killer. This is the main body of your paper. For each of Erikson's relevant stages, meaning the ones that you're going to cover, dedicate a subsection. Now, I already did it for you. Dedicate a subsection to detailing the core conflict and explaining how the serial killer's experiences resulted in a negative resolution. Note that subsections are not centered. They are flushed to the left, like I put here. You can view many example papers. All right, and that's where now I break down this. So you look at it, this is just for your information. So look at what is the core crisis going on in that stage? And then what is the killer's experience? So I give you like a snapshot of what you kind of need to cover. So I just started it for you. Now again, you don't have to call it stage 1. You can title it whatever you want. You can title it Erikson first stage if you want. I just did this for you to make it easy. So I just start with looking into, and then start off looking into, Erik Erikson's stage of trust versus mistrust, the serial killer that I am writing about, and then go whatever you're going to say and then cite that, right? And then if you're continuing on using that same, information, then you can just cite at the end. Cite whenever. You might be using 2 or 3 articles within the same paragraph. So again, you really need to brush up on where to cite. I give you all of the information in the APA resources. Look at the example paper that I gave you, that I put in there. The student's name you'll see is Hannah, okay? And it's titled like clinical psychology. Look at that example paper. If you just kind of just kind of skim that, you'll see how she cites. How, again, it's not about a serial killer. It's something completely different. I'm only giving you that as a reference as to what a good APA paper should look like. So again, I gave you then moving to the next stage, blah, blah, blah. And again, we're focusing now on the serial killer and how Erikson's theory relates to that. If you now are using your own self, right? Remember, this is a research paper. It's not a personal paper. So you're going to use elements. If you're not doing the serial killer and you're using yourself, you're going to use your own experiences in life and how that relates to Erikson. Okay. But again, it's a research paper. So it's going to be less personal, but how snippets of those stages of your life align with Erikson's theory. Now, you're going to use you're going to use different kinds of references. So if you're talking about yourself, you can look at a lot of people talk about divorce, right? Coming from a divorced family. And so you can find information related to divorce. It doesn't have to be Erikson, okay? The bulk of your, look at the directions. It has to be, you have to have I think I have in there at least 2 of your references have to be related to Erickson. And the rest can be information that's relatable to what you're writing about. So I hope that makes sense. Obviously, if you're doing the serial killer part, it's not all going to be Erickson, right? You have to use Erickson to incorporate with the serial killer, but you're going to find information about the serial killer that's not related to Erickson. So, and I think most of you have done a research paper or two that where you understand the gist of what you need for this. Now, I have all 8 stages here. That does not mean you're going to use all eight stages, because some of the serial killers, many of them, they've died, right? They died in their 20s or 30s. So you're not going to go through all the stages. You're going to go through maybe half of them. So again, you just delete these out because you're not covering them. If you have a serial killer that lived well into their 80s or whatever, and it's relevant to your paper, then by all means go ahead. But if not, you take them out. That's why I said, note, you may not go through all the stages. You can focus on childhood through adult. And then you're going to end with your conclusion. Now, conclusion can be on the same page. It's not going to be on a separate page if it's not orphaned. So you just continue on. And then notice references. My references are perfectly aligned. They're in alphabetical order. You'll notice they are hanging indent. They've got dates, authors. When we're doing APA, we have to use dates, authors. Sometimes, like if you have an encyclopedia, right? Or you're using the APA manual, you might have ND, no date, because there's no author, right? There's an author, but you're using a definition or something. So you're not looking up someone's information. APA, maybe 1 can be ND when you're doing a paper of this magnitude. This is research, so there's 9999 out of 10. You're going to find a date. You're going to find an author. So Google Scholar is your friend. NIH, National Institute of Health. That's a great one to use. The other thing I wanted to kind of go over, and I'll do this for you really quick. Let's go www.google Scholar. Wait, Google. What am I doing? Let me just do this, make it easy. There, Google Scholar. All right, so if I pull something up and I just say information, or I'm always going to put scholarly, even though this is Google Scholar. Scholarly information about Richard Ramirez, right? Okay. And you'll notice I've got all this stuff. So if you want to sift through, right, make sure your information is up to date so you can custom do the date. So notice how I'm only showing this because I don't want to look at old articles. So let's just say I use this, it pulls it up and I get some information from it. I can copy paste it in my document. That I'm not plagiarizing it because I'm just going to look, I want to have it like, I don't want to go back and forth. So I might do that and say, okay, I want to like use this, but I'm going to put it in my own words. Then you're going to take it out, right? The beautiful thing about APA or Google Scholar is, see where it says cite? It's going to give it to you already. So you don't have to use Citation Machine or any other thing. So click cite and it's going to bring up MLA, APA, Chicago, all of them. So what you're going to do is you're going to just click once. And because we're using APA, we're going to go copy, right? And then we're going to go back to the document. Now, what I'm going to do, let me just do copy dashboard. I'm going to go back to your class. I'm going to go to modules because I just want to show you this because I think it will be very helpful. Okay, so now I will download this just so that you can see what you'll do. All right, so now I'm going to do editing or enable editing. Okay, and I need to fix it. Okay, so now you noticed I copied and pasted, right? So keep this here because don't keep it for good. But what I would do is get rid of this, right? So just get rid of this. And now everything is aligned for you. Now I'm going to copy and paste that. Now notice how it's not in the correct font. So all you're going to do, you can wait till the end. You want to copy this and then go to change it. And then I have to move my little self there. You want to find, oops, Times New Roman, and boom. Okay, so you see how easy that was. I didn't have to go crazy and try to do all the stuff. Boom, it did it here, and it's in alphabetical order. So I really hope that this helps you. I know it's a long tutorial, but I also wanted to say certain little rules and things about APA, is that when you're saying something for the first time, and let me go back to that. Let me go back to the paper. So notice how I put in here research conducted. All right, let's actually look at this. All right, so in my first, section of psychological factors, I put factors influencing serial killer behaviors and actions may include psychological disorders like antisocial personality disorder, APD, or psychopathic tendencies and sadistic personality traits. And then I cited it, right? It's correct. Here's a rule that a lot of people mess up. Anytime you say something, right, that you can abbreviate, or an acronym, whatever, you have to spell it out first. You cannot assume in APA, you don't assume that everyone knows what APD is, because they don't. So you would type out antisocial personality disorder. Then any other time that you reference antisocial personality disorder, you can just say APD. So you notice how in this sentence I said along with APD, I no longer have to spell it out again because I already spelled it out the first time. So the first time you do it, you spell it out, then put it in parentheses and go on. Same with this one. You may assume everyone knows what PTSD is. I mean, I do, but not everyone does. So the first time you do that, you have to spell it out, then put it in parentheses, and then you can move on. You can then say PTSD, moving on. So you'll notice that I use this reference. Then I wanted to get a little fancy, right? Instead of using it at the end, I said research conducted by, I don't know how to say this name, but research conducted by this person, 2024, that's just another way to cite, found that there are psychological factors rooted deep within the individual that can cause them to act out their violent tendencies. Notice how I went on even more using this reference, but now I'm done. So then you have to cite again at the end. Period goes on the outside. I could have started with research has found that there are psychological factors rooted deep within the individual that cause them to act out their violent tendencies. Well, then I could have put the author here instead, and then I would have had to cite again there. But I decided it sounded better, for this paragraph or this sentence to do it that way. Again, you have creative ability to cite how you want as long as it makes sense. So I wanted to provide one, decent little, just to show you what this looks like. Then you go into that, boom, that, and then the bulk. So this is what it looks like. Again, I hope that helped you. I know, I went a little under 40 minutes, but I felt it was very important to address this so that you have a good working knowledge of how to set up your APA paper. Again, so make sure grammar is correct. Make sure the title page is correct. Make sure that the title is only on the title page and then the second page. It should not be on any other pages after. Make sure your spacing is on point. Look at this. Everything is double spaced all the way through, even to the title page or the reference page. There's no extra spacing. What I'm finding is some people are having extra spacing in between paragraphs. We don't want that. So make sure before you turn it in, everything is double spaced all the way through. The only thing that has extra spacing is between your title and your name. That's it. So again, brush up on citing, referencing, make sure dates correct, make sure everything is just titled correctly, because on this paper, this is where I am actually docking off because I've gone through this exhaustively. So I know that if it's not done, it's because maybe you didn't watch the video. So again, if you need anything, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to send me the paper ahead of time, then you can do that. Again, last week before it's due, I'm not looking at anything because I am grading a lot of papers that are being turned in. So I really hope that this helped you. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, reach out. If you're doing the traditional paper, you're just, it's going to be different. It's going to be your title, and then literature review, you're going to come up with your own separate, you know, level 1, level 2, whatever you do. Titles. God, now I'm lost. I'm like, okay, what am I saying now? Now I'm tired. All right. So again, you're going to follow the same kind of format. If you're doing the traditional, it's not a case study. You're just doing an number 2. The directions are there. The reason I'm doing this alternative is because so many people, I used to have a serial killer project, and people were like, oh, I took your class because I heard you did a project. And I said, yes, that was an additional assignment. So I actually took that away. And because oh, I wanted to do that so much, I thought, okay, how can I do an alternative instead? But you do the APA paper and do it that way. So that's the reason I was able to kind of come up with this. So again, a lot of people are wanting to do this one, so I wanted to at least give people the opportunity. So hope that helps. I'm done. Have a beautiful day, evening, whenever you're watching this. And yeah, I'm here if you need to ask me any questions. All right. Peace.